Welcome to a very special episode of Cosmic Road, where we are joined by the one and only Dennis Nappi. Welcome to the show, Dennis.
Jack, thank you for having me on.
I can't wait for this. Dennis is an accomplished remote viewer. He's with Future Forecasting Group that I talk about all too often because they're just awesome. And he is just phenomenal. Recently, Future Forecasting, I don't want to get it wrong because Daz has his own group, Hellfire. Which group specifically was this viewing for on behalf
Okay.
of?
So Daz has got so many little projects going on. Daz is my teacher, my mentor, my friend, my role model. I met Daz back when we were crypto viewing. I got brought on board as the host of the show. I'm giving a little bit of backstory if that's okay.
Yeah, go
Um,
for it.
yeah, so I got brought on, and I was just a guy in my basement who was interested in remote viewing and writing books, and they brought me on to do interviews for them. And Daz took me on to train me in remote viewing, and at the time CRV, coordinate remote viewing or control remote viewing, and that evolved into his own method, which is called Flow, which is a derivative of CRV. Um, and through that journey, he was creating different projects for us, and he started something called the Hellfire Remote Viewing Club. And it was just for those of us out there that Daz was, familiar with, some of his former students, to take on these mystery targets, these targets that, could be a little bit dark, could be a little bit scary. And from that, he created, through the Future Forecasting Group platform, the Down the Rabbit Hole team. It's a new team we just started up about a year ago. So we're under the umbrella of Future Forecasting. We're called Down the Rabbit Hole because we take those mysteries and really see how far the rabbit hole leads us. We have about a month per project to work on it and explore, with Daz as our project manager, and he guides us through these different mysteries that we're exploring each and every month that we release through the Down the Rabbit Hole website.
Okay, fantastic, fantastic. And just as a teaser, guys, what we're going to be talking about is the Giza megastructure. That is what this remote viewing was all about. And hopefully, we'll find some interesting stuff about the Giza megastructure through going through Dennis's data. But first, just to give you a little information about Dennis, Dennis Nappi the second. And am I pronouncing your name right?
You
Nappi
are.
is.
Yes, you
Okay.
are.
I've been following Dennis for years with the Future Forecasting Group, but you never know, right? He's a U.S. Army veteran, former intelligence agent, and former police officer who has dedicated his life to exploring the deeper dimensions of human consciousness and the hidden forces shaping our world. Drawing from his background in intelligence and public service, Dennis brings a disciplined yet open minded approach to the study of intuition, metaphysics, and remote viewing. As a host and analyst with the Future Forecasting Group and a member of the Down the Rabbit Hole remote viewing team, Dennis investigates both historical and forward looking targets, bringing mystery with method. His work delves into humanity's origins, potential futures, and the unseen architects of reality. As an experienced educator, Dennis has supported neurodivergent and emotionally sensitive students at a special education as a special education teacher and dean of students, blending empathy, structure, and self-awareness in his work with children and families. And it goes on, but that's just a really impressive bio, Dennis. And
Thank
thank
you.
you for all the work that you do. That's just incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, it's
Uh,
been it's been a journey, man. I've been a lot of different areas. I think that's my ADHD brain. I just constantly need something new. I didn't realize it till a few years ago, that that's probably what's going on with me, which is why I think I have so many different types of experiences. But it's been quite the journey for sure.
Well, it seems working out for you. You're peering into secrets that the rest of us can't even imagine.
Yeah, it's been pretty cool to get access to this. It's a true honor for me.
And has the Giza megastructure been on your radar before now?
No, not other than the pictures that came out, the recent scans that came out with these spiral structures underneath it, and I always thought, oh, that's interesting. But let's
Yeah,
see more,
yeah.
because of course a picture like that comes out and there's controversy about it, and the conspiracy side just goes and runs with it, and so you don't know what to think. You have to draw your own conclusions. I am a believer that there's a lot more to the story than we're told, and I think that there was. I'm a fan of Graham Hancock's work, and I think we are a species with amnesia. And I think there was a great society and civilization, probably several here, that have risen and fallen. And my data suggests that as well in my session.
I do too. I mean, the evidence is all over the world and potentially evidence of different civilizations.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, is the if the Giza megastructure exists, was it built by the same people that built the megalithic construction all around the world? Found all of places like Cusco and also Egypt and
Mhm.
just all over. Is that the same civilization that built the mounds, which also has a global presence? There is a global phenomenon of mounds and
Yeah.
superstitions associated with giants, not just in North America. See, I thought that may be a North American superstition, but after looking into it, no, that's actually a global thing. And so there's different things going on in the ancient past, and it's hard to know what's connected and what's not. But that's where you guys come in. You are going to tell us all about it. So let's get into your data. I can't wait to go through this. What you found, and not we're not necessarily going to get the bottom line on all of this, but hopefully we'll get some insight
Yeah.
into some of what was going on.
Interesting. Just to segue real quick, you talked about the mounds years ago. We did an interview. I think his name was Roz Ben, and he was a researcher on what he called ancestor technology, which was tied all into the mounds all over the world. And the remote viewers looked at that. I think we were crypto viewing back then. I'm sure it's out there in the archives somewhere. And it was fascinating looking at the technology that's tied into these mounds, and then how the newer civilizations would come in and they would build on top of these mounds because they were sources of power and kind of occupy that. And then, with the specific to the Giza target that we're about to talk about, my data did indicate that there were several of these structures throughout the planet that were in communication with one another. So I do think there were connections, not to the mounds, but to these mega structures that we were looking at, certainly connected to other platforms around the world.
Have you heard of the Korahora shaft?
I have not.
I did a video about that. This bizarre shaft that very few have ever seen or explored up in the Caucasus Mountains,
Mhm.
north of the country of Georgia. And yeah, it's way up in the mountains, and there's this weird, seemingly man-made shaft that goes pretty deep. And it's a prehistoric, construction. We don't know who built this or why, but it's
Wow.
possible that it is like an air shaft for some deeper subterranean structure. And nobody's studying it. Nobody's exploring it. Anyway, yeah, okay.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so a possible connection to this network that you're seeing potentially.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Okay, all right. Well, let's go through it. All right. What did you what was your beginning impressions?
So let me give a quick caveat just for those that aren't familiar with remote viewing, because I always like to be cautious with my data. I'm going to talk about the data that I brought back, and I do have faith in the quality of the data that I did bring back. But remote viewing is one tool among many, and just because I feel confident in my data, it should be evaluated with actual feedback when it comes in. So I think I have a fascinating story here. But we want to seek that corroboration point as well, because from every remote viewing session, you've got good data, bad data, and noise. So there are aspects of this that I may say that may never actually be accurate, may be tied into something else wherever my imagination went to at that point in time. So with that caveat being said, I just don't want to sit here and say everything because I saw that's exactly what happened. But these were great sessions. There were corroboration points, and with remote viewing as well. The way that is set up is that alls we were given, there was 4 of us on the team. It's myself, Coral, Demi, and Susan, and Daz was our project manager. The only thing we knew was an 8-digit coordinate. They give us that 8-digit coordinate, and then we use that number, and it connects our consciousness to whatever the target may be. And we don't know what we're looking at until the project is closed and Daz gives us the reveal, and then we go through our session. So this was all done completely blind to what this target was. So that being said, I do have a presentation that I can share and show the highlights of my data.
Sure. And in full disclosure, I've seen the whole session with all the viewers and all the data. Great stuff. And I
Yeah,
guess
thank
it's
you.
currently available at Future Forecasting.
Yeah, this one it's posted at rabbitholerv.com. That's where the down the rat, and I'm sure it's up at future forecasting as well because we're underneath them. But rabbitholerv.com will get you the full presentation of our team.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, let's see here. Let's get the
Yeah.
screen
Go
share.
find it and join.
Let's see. Window. Here we go. Beneath the pyramid. All right. Okay. Can you see my screen?
I think I have to add it to the stage. There we go. Yeah, I can see it. You're on.
All right. Do you see the full screen or do you see the? It doesn't matter which one you
It's the
see.
full screen,
But
and then we're little windows to the side.
okay, that's okay. We can work with that one too. That's fine. Let's see here. Okay. All right. So here we go. Remote viewing beneath the pyramid of Giza. And it doesn't want to. There we go. All right. So the major themes that that came through in my sessions on this one, I explored some of the life that was affiliated with this structure's life in the machine, and then the order. There was like this holy sacred order that was accessing this machine. And then when I say the end here, I mean the end of this civilization. We had elements of that, the cataclysm that came through. So when I first started doing my session, almost right away, I was greeted by this figure on the left-hand side. Was wearing some kind of cloak or some kind of robe. I identified him as like a guardian or a sentry at the entryway. And I wondered, is this some kind of holographic projection? I almost felt like I was playing a video game and like this was just the guardian. And I couldn't quite tell, is there a person here or am I, as the remote viewer, actually being greeted by this, this intelligence holographic thing? And I felt like it was assessing me as to whether or not I was eligible to enter this structure and explore it. I had never experienced anything like that in a remote viewing session where I was kind of being screened before I could be granted access to it. And it just reminded me of like an elvish culture or like the Nordics or an Atlantean feel. And I say that I haven't really explored Atlantis too much, but that was just the impression that I got as a viewer during the session, some kind of Atlantean feel. And then I had this other visual of, if you see the two pictures on the right, what I call the user. Someone was working within the structure. Their facial features were very long and pointed, and they just felt pristine. And they were just a very wise culture or class, and they were intelligent, and their lifespan seemed very, very long. And they had these memories. I did get this sense, and when I say long, I say probably 1 to 400 years is how long they would live.
I'd take it.
And they had these multiple lifetimes. A sense that when they would die, they would remember their previous lives. So this reincarnation was a normal piece. So even though they may live to be 300 years old, they may have the knowledge of 1,000 years of existence, which is really cool to experience that. So then we're looking at this structure here. And this is the interesting thing about remote viewing. Like when I pulled the best sketches that I did of this. So this is the pyramid here, right? Remote viewing, I'd say my weakness as a viewer is something that I'm an area that I'm growing is sketching the building, right? I'm really good at describing like the emotional impacts, the intuitive things that are going on, and then the interactions of different beings and the reasons why. When it comes to sketching the building in remote viewing, a lot of times we look at the basic gestalts. Do we have elements of it there? So even if my analytical conclusion is not completely accurate, the basic elements of what we're looking at are there. So if you look at this, this structure that I drew here, what do we have? We have a pyramid on top, and then these spiraling things that were underneath it, and you see that basic sketch right there. But when you look at my full session, what I initially experienced, I was describing it as a giant seashell, a giant stone structure. And it had all these, and I felt that this was an advanced piece of technology, the way this structure was constructed. And I actually described this structure as being grown. So there's two ways that I can interpret that. One, I just didn't accurately describe this structure. Or two, maybe this is a piece that's beneath the surface of the pyramid, this seashell type of Fibonacci grown structure. But either way, when you look at this sketch right here, you do have the basic pyramid shape here, and it's got the spike that spirals going down, which is what the pictures suggest when you look at these scans that they have. And then I have here on the left-hand side, you have again, the spiral structure coming up. And then I drew these holes for air intakes. And I know on the Great Pyramid of Giza, there are these openings that they were calling airways or whatever on there. So I was getting the basic understanding of the structure here. And what was neat is that everything was connected with this structure. It was all one piece, and it was all designed to funnel energy. Now, actually, I just listened to an episode of the Y-Files talking about the pyramid as being some kind of energy source. And he goes through all the different reasons why and all the ways that this was designed as one giant transmitter of energy. And I certainly had those elements for sure within my session here. The way it was designed, the way it was embedded in the ground, the way everything spiraled, the way everything was connected. And I did get that at the bottom, there was an opening of this spiral that went into some kind of aquifer or, a sacred spring or just, water deep under the ground. And that all had something to do with the way the energy and chemicals and materials would interact. And we do suspect that there was water, beneath the pyramids as well. So these are just valid touch points of feedback, where we can look at this and say, okay, we're definitely in the ballpark here. We're definitely describing things that corroborate to actual events.
Yeah, and
Or
that's what
actual
others have
structures.
theorized about, for years, is that, there is some water under there and there is some sort of interaction between the water and the
Yeah.
pyramid, possibly generating some sort of energy. That has been a
Yes.
theory out there for a while. And your data is seeming to corroborate that, completely blind of any of that, which is
Yes.
fascinating. And I'm
And I
really
was
fascinated by this keeper that you saw, this guardian, this Nordic Atlantean guy. You wanted to know if he was a hologram or not. Did you find out? Did this being have a will of its own? Was it a projection? What was that?
I'm not sure about the sentry, that, this guardian person. I encountered them once or twice. As I get into, I think, my next slide, talking about this machine, there were levels where this structure was kind of evaluating your own mind and your consciousness, and it was going to determine if it was going to allow you to access the data within it. It was like a giant internet interface. Um, so I think this century was maybe that first being that I saw was probably some kind of holographic projection, or memory that was screening me to give me access. But then the being that was actually interfacing, I feel, was an actual living being at the time. And I got to observe how they interacted with this machine.
So you say of the time. So you mean this is an historical being, not a
Yeah.
being that's present there and interacting with you while you're viewing it at the moment, or this
Correct.
is you're going back through time at the time of the operation of this, pyramid, and this is a being that is working with this pyramid, and he sees you, and he perceives you, and is studying you.
I would say the holographic projection I felt was scanning me, which isn't normal in remote viewing. I don't typically have experiences like that. And again, that could have been just my imagination, but that was my perception during that session, is that this thing was seeing me, was aware of me, and was determining if it's going to grant me access. Because I think it viewed me as just another intelligence or another consciousness, which I suspect was typical given the way these structures, I think, were all connected energetically, like I said, like a giant wireless internet. And I think it would just screen consciousness that would come into it. And the neat thing about remote viewing, when you start learning remote viewing, is that time and space operate differently. In remote viewing, we can project our consciousness anywhere in time or space. So I can view something that happened 5,000 years in the past, and I can also tell you what's going to be in the news next month. Now, I'm not as good at that as the future forecasting, Dick Daz, Edward, and Naeem. But every month they tell us what stories are going to be in the news in great detail. So you start to think about time and space a lot differently in remote viewing.
Okay, great. Well, let's continue with the data. That's just super fascinating.
So then we look at this, what I call the interface, the life and the machine. And so the machine itself doesn't work without the life in there. So as the life is walking into this structure, that's when this interface begins. And I sensed that they were barefoot in there, because there was something tactile about it. As it's connecting with the bare feet, it's starting to evaluate this life form and get an understanding of, number one, is this person worthy? Now, I don't know if that was based on a DNA code. I know for sure it also had to do with their level of consciousness. And I'll get into, when I talk about the order in a little bit, what this sacred order was, whether or not they were worthy to even interact with it. Because there was a very, yeah, if you remember, like when Google first came out, and you had to learn how to use a query, right? How to ask a question of Google. And it was akin to that. Like they had to structure their questions and their thought patterns in a very specific way to interact with this machine, and then the machine would interact with them and give them the information that they needed. So the machine operates when the life is in contact with the structure. And I had this table, and I'm a terrible artist, but this table, if you can see, I kind of have these intertwined lines that are trying to represent the legs of the table. That's on the, believe it or not, that thing that looks like an egg is a table. But from what I saw, it was this beautiful picture, like Frodo in, in the Elvish land. It's just, and it's just this Elvish made, beautiful, glowing white, pristine table that seems to just grow out of the ground. And what would happen is this life would go up and they would put their hands on the table. And now that would complete the circuit. It was an energetic circuit. So you have the feet on the floor, you have the hands on the table, and then the wall in front of them. And things would just kind of fade away. And now all of a sudden, as I'll show on the next slide, they're in like this full immersive virtual reality. Now, if you look at this sketch on the bottom here, I have these wavy lines with these veins coming up beneath it. And those blue little sparks are pools of energy. And imagine looking at what seems like a flat surface of a table under a microscope. And you see that what you thought was flat is actually an uneven surface. And the reason for that was they needed that uneven surface to collect these pools of energy, so it would create the proper balance between the energy that was really coming up from the interaction of the water to the spiral, to the structure, to the legs of the table, to the surface of the table, to the hands. And that was to create the right balance of energy from the table to the energy coming from the being's hands, if that makes sense. And this was just an example of one of the things that the being was seeing here. And this was like this giant, meteor that was coming in, or this comet that was coming in. I quickly stopped the session at that point because the project we did before this was 3i Atlas, and that just totally consumed my consciousness. So I took a break there. I was like, I can't get any more comet data right now, and I had to move past that. But this is kind of the idea behind it.
Were you saying the 3i Atlas was alien or just an asteroid or a meteor? Comment.
Oh, that's, you know what? Can we come back to that if we have time
Okay, yeah,
again?
sure.
Because there's a lot behind that.
Okay.
For sure, a lot of psychic noise behind that. But with this one, they just got immersed in this virtual reality that they were seeing. So I'll look at my next slide here. And here we are again with the machine.
I mean, I just have to ask, if they were viewing
Sure.
this object coming in, do you think that was, psychic noise or, a projection on your end, or were they actually concerned about some object coming in?
I definitely got, and I'll talk about on my last slide, a cataclysm that ended this civilization.
Okay.
I don't know if it was a meteor that was
because that
in.
is, one of the theories about the Younger Dryas period and the Younger Dryas cataclysm. These objects coming in and devastating impacts, melting the glaciers and so on, causing flooding and wiping out Atlantis. Interesting. Okay.
It's highly possible. It was just so similar to all the 3i Atlas noise. I felt, as a remote viewer, you have to be very careful that you don't start making conclusions, because then you go down a rabbit hole of what's most likely imagination and noise. So I felt it was better to not explore that any further, because I felt really strong on this signal as I'm describing everything else. But it's highly possible this is actual data. And I think I have some corroborating pieces without saying there's a comet coming at the very end of the session. Okay, so these are just more sketches of what I'm calling the machine here. And on the left-hand side, just a rough sketch here. It looks like an arena, and you've got this life form just standing in the center of this chamber here, and everything was curved, and they were getting, this is, again, the interface for them. And in the center here is that circle at the bottom. Again, these are just rough sketches that I'm making while I'm in my remote viewing state. This is just data and information that's flowing into the person's mind now. And I said here, these are ancient or sacred symbols that probably have this forgotten, long lost language. I think I may even label this as possibly like the Atlantean language. So this is just information flowing into the mind. And on the very right hand side, you see this sketch here, and it was like that spire represents the central core running through this entire structure. And then, those little dots going around in concentric circles were actually different life forms. And this was really neat because you have the little goofy looking face I drew on the right hand side. This is all the same scene right here, and this is what they're perceiving. And I had a quick visual as an overlay, which is a metaphor really, of Professor Xavier in X-Men with the helmet on, and those scenes, if you've seen X-Men, where he just sees people walking all over his mental awareness, his mental field. And that's what I was experiencing. But what was really cool about this is it was so much quieter. I had a comparison to the human mind, and the human mind is so noisy. Again, according to my data anyway, there's so much chatter going on. We're thinking about 20 different things at the same time, and then jump into this subject, jump into this subject, jump into this subject. And I felt that if we were to get in here and look at human minds, it would be almost overwhelming with noise. But this civilization, it was as if every mind there was just holding one thought at a time. So even though there was a lot, it wasn't as chaotic as our current human civilization, because each person was just focused on what they had to do. And this is where I got a glimpse of their civilization. And it was a civilization filled with gratitude and respect. Everyone had a job. Everyone had a purpose. And it didn't matter what that was. They were proud to do whatever that job was because they knew that it served the greater good of their civilization. It was a really neat thing to see. And that's what this mind was doing. This mind was looking for specific information, and he had a glimpse of really everybody that was connected to that civilization. And I just had that sense of humility and gratitude, and just thankful to whatever their part was. They were happy to be doing it. It was really cool. Any questions on the machine, and then I can move on to the sacred order?
No, I mean, that just sounds like a fascinating culture. I can't imagine just having one thought in my head at a time.
I know. I've got at least 10 running at any given time.
Now, I do have to wonder if they are so focused on the collective, if they have as much individuality and freedom as we enjoy.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time thinking about the collective mindset. The science fiction series I just finished writing, it's all about it's called The Hive. It's all about a hive mind. And I didn't get that impression that they were a collective in that aspect. I think it was more that was just society, as their society was structured, they just cared about their civilization in a communal type of way. Everyone had their role. And they were okay with it. I didn't get any deeper impressions of like the political structure behind it or anything. That really wasn't the focus of the target. But they seemed at peace. They seemed peaceful and content with however it was they structured themselves.
Sounds very utopian.
Yeah, I did get that.
It sounds very much like how I want to imagine Atlantis.
Yes, 100%. And again, I say I'm not someone who's ever really studied Atlantis. I know that I know the lore behind it, but I don't think I've ever done a remote viewing project looking specifically at Atlantis. I've never read books about Atlantis. So for me to get that data point, I'd say is unique and significant to it.
There's conflicting information about Atlantis. So,
okay.
Although I've studied it, I can't say I understand it, because you read one book, it'll say one thing. You read another book or another remote viewing or another past life experience, you'll get a different, story.
Right.
So, it's not like there is an agreement on Atlantis.
And it all could be true. I mean, if I'm sure 2,000 years from now, 12,000 years from now, when they talk about this time in history, there's so many different caveats to human existence right now. Oh, they're a peaceful society. Oh, they're a warring society. Oh, they're agrarian. Oh, they're so urban. They're technology. Oh, no tech. We have all of those things, right? It all depends on what part of the world and what community that is telling the story. So I'm sure maybe Atlantis was equally as complex. I don't know. Maybe one day we'll find out.
And it could be, when some people are talking about Atlantis, they're actually talking about Lemuria or Mu or some of these other possible ancient prehistoric civilizations.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. And those are fascinating stories in and of themselves, for sure. So we have this sacred order. And this was what I'm calling the priest class, and that was my label of it. But they were this sacred order, and they were the knowledge keepers. And it reminded me, again, as a metaphor, if you've ever seen the movie The Giver, they just held this sacred knowledge of who they are, where they came from, who they were, and because of that knowledge, their minds were trained to interface with these machines, and these machines had access to all information. It was almost like an advanced AI, but I don't want to call it an AI. But these machines were good at making predictions, but I don't think it was in the psychic sense. I think these predictions were based on, if I go in to use that machine is interfacing with my own mind. Therefore, it has all of the knowledge that I have. And every user that goes in there, it has all of the knowledge accumulated from every single user. So the machine can take all of those data points, much like an AI does, and it can analyze it and it can make predictions. And I feel that that's what it was doing. It was looking at all these different ways of getting data. And I think it could get data beyond just, the minds of these beings. And it was able to get data and analyze things and make predictions, and that's why this order was so important, because they had to preserve how information was fed to this machine and how they were asking questions. And I had a list of, the different types of questions that they would ask, like, who am I? What is my purpose? What is God? How do I interface with God? And depending on the ways that they would ask these questions would grant them access to different levels of knowledge, because the way you phrase your question is an indicator of what you're capable of handling, if that makes sense.
Okay, metaphysical prompt mastery. That is amazing. Wow. So did they create this machine, or was this machine created by others?
I didn't get into that aspect of it. If I had to guess, this felt like their technology to me. I don't feel like they just found it. Like, when you listen to, what is it, the Aztec story, and they came across, was it Teotihuacan, I think? Like, they found that city, and they don't know who built it. It was either Teotihuacan or Tenochtitlan in Mexico. These people, this felt like it was their technology. Hence the Guardian at the beginning, was protecting it, because they made it and they interfaced with it. It was specific. It felt like it was specific to their code to interact with, best was with them.
Yeah, I think it was Teotihuacan. I think
Mhm.
that's right. Which of course was made at least 1,000 years before the Aztecs,
Yeah.
if not longer. I forget when it was made, but uh,
It's
yeah,
it's fascinating. Like, they were wandering through trying to find, where home was going to be. I mean, can you imagine, like, wandering through, like, nomadically trying to find a place to live, and you find like a city like that that's completely abandoned? I mean, what's got to go through your mind? Like, who built
yeah,
it? Where did
yeah.
they
I mean,
go?
you're an Aztec, and you find these ancient ruins and these pyramids of this
Right.
culture that existed, so long ago. That's ancient
Yeah.
and unknown, and you don't know. There's no surviving information about those people.
Right.
For
They're
them,
gone.
and we don't have much to go on either.
Yeah, for sure. So we have this order, this sacred order that is preserving the knowledge. And the being that was in there, the one that I saw that was interacting with this machine, the one that I encountered, I got the sense that he was very young, very new. I would call him an initiate. Still probably 1 to 200 years old, but he was being initiated into this order. And as he's getting access to this information, he's looking at this and he's getting this kind of rebellious feel, going like, this could be done better. This doesn't make any sense for them to do this way. And he's kind of formatting this rebellion in his mind against the elders. And he's sitting there going like, yeah, they don't know what they're talking about. Their ways are outdated, and really wanting to bring about this change and this rebellion, and a rebellion in thought and consciousness. He wasn't looking like overthrow, but he was looking to bring all this change. And what was interesting was that I got the perspective of the elders, and it was like, yeah, we've been there. This is part of the journey. Every one of us wanted to rebel against the system, because at this stage, when you see this information, that's the logical thing to want to do from your perspective. And they didn't encourage him, but they didn't discourage him. They just kind of looked the other way to let him work through that, because as he was going through this rebellion and trying to undermine the elders, it failed miserably. And now he had all this gusto and this excitement, And that was replaced with humility and wisdom, because he went through the experience of, I need to change this. And that change, that struggle, that fight brought an epiphany and awareness, and then a profound reverence and appreciation for the elders and why they held the positions and the structure, that they did. And they knew that that was his natural progression of growth. So, they allowed him the space to fail in order to grow and step into this order. So it's really neat to see that.
That's amazing teaching and very deep.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as a teacher myself, I think that's why that resonated so much with me, because so often we just want to run in and help, but sometimes the best help you can give somebody is to let them struggle and let them fail and let them learn from that experience. So my last slide here, I did sense this was like a gritty, beachy type of area, and there was a water interface not too far in front of it. And they do suspect that at one point, whether it was the Nile or some other body of water, was a lot closer to the pyramids themselves. I'm not a historian, but I have heard those conversations. And so this is the overall impression I had. Again, did I sketch the pyramid? No, but is the overall shape basically there? Yes. But what was interesting about this scene here is that I perceived this signal going out. And it reminded me, if have you seen the movie Valerian? You remember that
Yeah,
movie? So in the very
Luc
beginning,
Besson.
what's that?
Oh, the director, Luc Besson.
Oh yeah. Great movie. Very, very well thought out. But there's a scene where, the cataclysm happens and a signal goes out and you see this burst of energies just expel in all directions throughout the universe. And that's what I perceived right here, was this signal coming out of this structure. And exactly, I put a direct quote from what I wrote in my session. This is us. We were here and we are in trouble. The message is calm, and other stations send similar signals. They're broadcasting their signal as a final act of survival, a legacy. We were here. We existed. This is a final act done in solidarity with love and a sense of calm in the face of destruction. They want to live on through this signal and their memory. There is perfect solidarity and unity, acceptance and surrender with grace and humility. This is not the end, but is the end of this portion of existence, and that is catastrophically sad. So that was my experience there. Let me see if I can end this screen share now. Yep, I think we're back, right?
Yeah,
So that was
man,
the
that
end of
was
my session there. I did 5 separate sessions on that one. That wasn't all just one sitting. So I just pulled the highlights from all my sessions on that for tonight.
well. Thank you for sharing that with us. That was incredible, Dennis. It
Thank
really
you.
was. This mysterious order of long-lived beings. We can call them Atlanteans, whatever they were. I guess we can simplify it by calling them Atlanteans, but of course, we don't know
We
who
don't
they
know.
were. But these people, these humans, that were interacting with this structure and going underground along what looks like spiraling stairways along a great
Yeah,
shaft, which is what looks like they're capturing on those scans of the Giza megastructure.
right.
And it's interesting, if those are stairways on the outside of that, they must be covered, obviously, because they're on the
Yeah.
outside, and that's where all the rock and stuff is, and water and sand. So that's, I would have expected a stairway to be on the inside. So something else must be on the inside if that's the case. And then those structures, those shafts apparently go down to giant chambers. Is
Mhm.
that where you believe you saw, the Professor Xavier machine? Is it underground,
I
or
th-
is that more above ground?
I think I did hear some theories that the pyramids were possibly built on top of these structures. And I don't know. I'm speculating based on my data. I wonder if that structure existed and then they built the pyramid on top of that structure. So I would say you go somewhere right beneath the pyramid would be this structure where there's the room, where there's the interface. So if we're looking at the levels now, you would have the pyramid, and beneath that you would have this room where there's the interface, and then you have the spiral that goes all the way down, which they could access to these sacred pools of water underneath. So that right above the spiral, I would say, according to my data, is where they were having these interactions, because the energy was running up through from the water into the structure up to this seashell type of room, and then maybe the pyramid would sit on top of that. I'm not 100% sure.
No, I think that has gone on for a long time. Newer cultures
Oh,
building on top of existing
yes.
structures, places
Hmm.
of power. So that would
Right.
make sense. Of course, there does seem to be something anomalous about the construction of the pyramids themselves. The mainstream, history would have it built in 20 or so years.
Right.
The Great Pyramid, over 2 million blocks, in order for that to have happened the way they say it happened, there would have had to been like a block put in place like every 5 minutes, night and day for 20 years.
Yeah.
So, and some of these are massive blocks, taken from far away. So unlikely. So there is something anomalous about the construction of the pyramid, something unknown.
Right.
So possibly they could have been using some of the surviving technology from this older race that may have built these structures underground, potentially.
Hmm.
On the other hand, if the pyramids are indeed energy generators, then you would think they would be designed holistically, integrated with those underground elements,
Right.
not as a separate tacked on structure put on later, but as some sort of continuance of technology of some sort. But I mean, that's just me spitballing. You're the guy that looked at it and actually interacted with beings that were there. Well, what's your take?
I don't know. I mean, think with remote viewing, it's like picture watching a movie and you have a piece of paper and you're looking through like a little pinhole, right? So you're getting little glimpses of things and trying to see this whole big picture. So right now, if I had to guess what it was, assuming that my data is accurate, I would say that this structure, this interface, is connected to the pyramids, but underneath it, and then the spiral would go beneath it. But that's just one interpretation of the data. But that's what I would perceive, as of if I had to give a definite answer right now.
So, I mean, put a bow on it. Do you believe that they were foreseeing their doom in the Younger Dryas cataclysm, which is again connected, in people a lot of people's thoughts to all of this, and that would fit right in with what you were reviewing.
It's
Um,
yes. I can't say that it was the Younger Dryas. I really didn't get I didn't get a bearing on where I was in time, other than it was very old and it felt like, again, I don't know anything about Atlantis, but that was the feeling that I was getting, and that's a weird thing to say. So quite possibly Younger Dryas, but I did get a very strong sense that this civilization was wiped out, and they knew that it was coming. So that does fit the story and the timeline for sure. Or the other alternative, it's even older than that.
have you ever heard of Matthias Stefano?
I have not.
Oh yeah. Go find him on YouTube. Yeah, Matthias Stefano. He is a excuse me. He's a guy that remembers his past lives and has access to the Akashic records. He, so he says, and he remembers a life lived in Atlantis. It doesn't, seem to have been. He wasn't like a king or anything. He was just like a
Mm-hmm.
regular guy. But he can write in Atlantean. He can sing songs in Atlantean. He can
Wow.
tell you a great deal of information, according to him, about Atlantis. He even met, the Hermes, as the Egyptians and Greeks knew him,
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, before he left Atlantis, and he was some sort of priest, not a god. Anyway, fascinating stories, listening to the songs of Atlantis. He actually sings several songs
Wow.
in
That's pretty
Atlantean.
cool.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
really
So yeah,
cool.
definitely go check that out.
Yeah, I'll have to
Um,
check that out for sure.
yeah.
What's
Anyway, I wish there were some like really reliable, accurate information that we could trust for Atlantis.
yeah.
But there's conflicting information on that. But Egypt is long thought to have been a colony of Atlantis, one of many, but
Hmm.
their main colony. And survivors of Atlantis went there supposedly after the flood. But what you're seeing is they were actually foreseeing this happening. So that would have been before you would think the flood.
Yeah,
I'm just
quite
putting some
possibly.
pieces together. This is just
Yeah.
speculative. You're not saying that's what you were
Hmm.
seeing. But that's just
Right,
super
but that's what we
fascinating.
do, right? We're filling in the blanks here, and that would certainly make sense. And they felt that it was important that by sending that signal out, something about their culture was being preserved. And throughout my session, I got in talking about being preserved, I got the sense of, a hidden library. I wrote down the Library of Alexandria, the library beneath the Vatican. Not saying that's what they were, but it was something like that. I know there's talks of the lost library. I forget of what, but like being hidden beneath either the Sphinx or the Great Pyramids,
Yeah, the Hall of
and
Records.
that's what this was. That I did. That's what I wrote. Hall of Records. Thank you. Um, and so I definitely tapped into that, but I don't think that this Hall of Records is a bunch of scrolls or a bunch of books. I think it's this interface with this technology that has preserved this information, which is fascinating. So that Hall of Records, it's if we ever discover it, I think it will be an interface, and I think it will require adept minds capable of, in control of your own consciousness in order to interact with this appropriately. I don't think just any explorer can walk down there and put their hands on it and be able to access and navigate it. I think it'll need a trained mind
I
for
can
sure.
barely put my own socks on, Dennis. I'm afraid it's going to have to be you that goes down there.
Yeah,
Somebody
I would be
trained.
happy
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm trained for that, but I did feel that I was given a glimpse of how to use that machine. I know that sounds really weird and crazy, but that's what the data was like. That's what the experience was, and that's what's fun about it. It's a mystery. So if there's ever that opportunity, that feedback would be amazing to get even part of that, just to get some corroboration on that.
Well, I've got to say that the Guardian, the Sentry, if he was scanning you to see if you were worthy to understand this information, well, apparently you passed.
I got that impression, and again, that doesn't happen in every remote viewing session, and that could just be my conscious mind's way of interpreting, like getting past something difficult in remote viewing. But let's say that is really what was going on. I try very hard to keep my ego in check with remote viewing, because sometimes you're saying things that sound very, like, wow, I was chosen, I was special. I don't think that I was. I just think I had an opportunity to engage with something, some level of technology that I was able to interface with for a little bit, and have this experience. It was really cool. It was really cool to do it.
Well, a lot of the lore on Atlantis is they're connected to either ET or other dimensional beings, higher planes of existence.
Mhm.
It definitely sounds like they're having this fantastic technology.
Yeah.
Did you get any sense that they were in touch with beings, or that they had any assistance in any of this technology?
I got this sense of that, I wrote down, portal, gateway, doorway. But I think that was, I think that what that was signifying is a portal. Like our interface right now is a portal, right? We're connected through this window here on the internet, on the computer. And I felt that that's what that was referring to, but it was a lot more immersive. I got the sense that I was dealing with all one culture. Um, and the focus of the target wasn't to be, was Atlantis in touch with aliens? It was describe what's underneath the pyramid. And, so I think it was, at best right now, what I can say based on my data is that I was dealing with a highly advanced culture. This culture, I feel, probably was able to transcend the stars. Um, but they were very much Earth based. Now, did they originate on Earth? I don't know. But they were Earth based at the time of my experience, and their time on Earth was coming to an end because of this cataclysm. Now, it's possible. I did feel that at least one of these structures existed somewhere still today, and it's possible that there's elements of this culture somewhere on the planet today, but I wasn't directed in that, point in time to go look and explore that.
Okay, so I'm just trying to make sense of this. So if they were
Mhm.
foreseeing their own doom, but they were in Egypt at the time, then they're foreseeing the doom, I suppose, of the actual Atlantis and not the colony where they were at. If they were in Egypt, you know, um, these are the guys that were already there. They're foreseeing the doom of the main culture, which was then destroyed.
Right.
And I guess the survivors and those that were in Egypt already, faded away because their main civilization was destroyed, and they blended in with the local populace, went back home, whatever it was. They were as a culture extinct, unless they have hidden underground all these years, which is what some people believe as well.
Right. You know, it's and here's the thing about remote viewing data. Like my sense was that there were these centers, these energy data centers all over the planet. Um, and I used the comparison. I said not so much where like today everyone has a computer. There weren't that many, but there were enough where they were spread out all over the planet. Probably they were probably regional based. And I felt that every one of these centers was sending out the same signal. It gave me the impression that this was planet wide. So whatever was happening, no matter where you were on Earth, you were done. I felt like this was everyone, the entire civilization was getting wiped out, which is why I don't really have a good time frame for this. But as a caveat in understanding remote viewing data, when you view a cataclysm and you're viewing it from the perspective of the where the event happens, you know, if life is ending in that location, life is ending in that location, and it's catastrophic. You know, Daz, a real world example, years ago, Daz drew a mushroom cloud, and everybody's freaking out, like, oh my gosh, this is awful, and he's describing it as this catastrophic thing. And the following month, you know, the exact sketch that he drew was the explosion in Lebanon. And when you watch that it's the exact thing that Daz described, the location, all of that. But in his session, it felt catastrophic, possible, like world ending type of thing. But in reality, it was very specific to one region. So the viewer gets so immersed in it sometimes, and it could feel a lot bigger than it really is. So I don't know. It's possible. I know that's a whole long explanation of it, but I always try to be just really cautious in how I present my data.
Well, I'm not cautious
Yeah,
at all, Dennis. I'll just put
which
it out
that's
there.
great.
But okay. So for argument purposes, let's say it was global.
Mhm.
That your perception was correct. Well, that would put it in line with all of the flood myths, whether it's the Christian Bible or all of the
Yes.
others. It's a total wipeout of everything with
Mhm.
just a few survivors. Unless you've
Yes.
got an arc handy, you're out of luck. That is the story on the flood, right?
Mhm.
In mythology, and that seems to be kind of what you're getting a sense of, which is fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, and take the comet data, you know, and then I had all this water data, you know, as an interface. I think that was significant to my session. Again, that wasn't the focus of the target, but it's a luminous thing, right? You're going to look at the brightest thing when you're in that altered state sometimes, and that's why you got to pull yourself back to the target. But these things come in because how can you not see it? Now I'm looking at a building right now, but oh my gosh, this is the end of a civilization. How can I not at least give that a little bit of my attention? And it did. It felt globally catastrophic in my session for sure.
Okay, so what was the Giza megastructure? What was it all for? Yeah, I think you said something about generating energy. Is that correct? And what kind of energy and for what purpose, other than to
The
send
in
out signals?
the interface I looked at, it was a storage of data, knowledge, and like analytical predictive technology. It was a giant information database and interface for this culture and civilization. And there were many of them throughout the planet. So there were also communication centers. That's what my data suggested.
So, I mean, that's just fascinating in of itself. I mean, you may have been looking at the Hall of Records. That's just
Yes.
insanely awesome.
Yeah.
But so you weren't getting a sense of the overall structure, or why they built this thing potentially a kilometer underground, and what it all was, other than, I
Mhm.
mean, other than the Hall of Records. I mean, was it all to facilitate the Hall of Records? Is that what your data suggests, or is there some other purpose to it?
I didn't get any information. You know, I know we looked at the pyramids as possibly being like these giant energy structures, much like a Tesla coil, where it was powering whatever other tech might have been out there. Um, for me, this was dealing with knowledge and information. It was strictly like a giant computer internet system. Not
Okay.
to say that there isn't more to it, but that was what I focused on in my session. So I'd say, you know, based on my data, that's what I felt the purpose of these things was about information and knowledge
All right,
and
man. Well,
communication.
that's just so fascinating. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that we should be talking about?
In relationship to this project, I mean, those are the highlights, for sure on this one. I mean, there's so much. I had to condense 5 sessions into 8 slides so we can get through it.
Yeah,
But
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is there anything, in our time remaining that you would like to talk about in regards to this?
those were the high points on that for sure. Just that piece of it being the Hall of Records, but in some kind of etheric format there, and the communication. They were the big things that came through for me.
Well, here's hoping somebody gets out a shovel and we can get down there, Dennis, and you can have a,
Yeah,
get a first person look at this thing. So,
I would absolutely love it.
all right, well, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find you in your various groups?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Future Forecasting Group, you can find them at ffgrv.com. And that company started as crypto viewing. They were looking at the changing economy and the impact that it has on really the world and where it's going. And it's helped us to navigate a lot of these changes that we're going through. And we've evolved now into adding. We have 3 remote viewing teams right now, and the team that I'm on is the Down the Rabbit Hole team. So that's rabbitholerv.com, and that's where we have all these mysteries that we're looking at. We did I think our first project was looking at the ancient civilization on Mars, and oh my gosh, it was one of the most powerful sessions with the Shroud of Turin, the Philadelphia experiment, among many other really cool mysteries. So you can find that rabbitholerv.com. And then for me personally, my website is 6sense, the number 6sensemedia.net. And that's where you can find my work, my personal remote viewing projects, and my books. I actually just published, if I can give a plug here, I just published the 3rd installment of my Hive series, The Hive Origins, Revelations of Reality. It's a trilogy looking at what happens when AI takes over the human mind, and how does humanity survive through that. So that was a really fun project to do. So book 3 just dropped last month.
Are
So
you a
excited about
novelist?
that. I am. I'm an author. Yes.
I as well, my friend.
Oh, check it out. Look, and here's my new one right here. Congratulations.
All
That's me.
right, very cool. Very cool,
Yeah,
man.
writing
Nice to meet a fellow
writing
author. I love
way
it.
to
And you're a Reiki guy, to judge by your shirt. So I'm a Reiki
yeah,
guy
I
as
do. I
well.
have my own Reiki company. I teach Reiki as well. Yeah,
Fist
it's
bump.
great.
Great
There we
Reiki
go.
author. All right.
That's it. We got a lot in common. We'll have to do this
Yeah, that's
again.
awesome, man. All right. Well,
Yeah,
okay. Well, so have we gone through all where people can find you, and
I think so.
if you give me your links, I'll be happy to send people to your book and everything else.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Yeah, they're in the page I sent you
Okay.
at the very
Okay.
bottom.
Great.
It'll have all 3 links. You can find it. You can find my books through my website, or on Amazon and Google. Just Google me and you can find it as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. It has been an honor.
Thank you, Jack. I appreciate you taking the time. I really enjoyed this.